Welcome to Resting Places, Learning Spaces, the podcast where we explore cemeteries, memorial spaces, and more, and the lessons they hold for history, memory, and education. I'm Dr. Hilary Van Dyke, and today we're diving into the world of Harry Potter, not through spells and Quidditch, but through the lens of death. This series is a 7-part battle between good and evil, and death is portrayed in a myriad of ways throughout it, from the loss of loved ones to the existence of ghosts to the infamous Deathly Hallows. To guide us through this conversation, I'm speaking with Professor Julian Wamble, professor, political scientist, and host of the podcast Critical Magic Theory. In his podcast, he insists that just because we love something doesn't mean we can't critique it. Along with discussing death in the Harry Potter world, we'll think about how educators can use fantasy to teach about real-world themes related to mourning and memory. Julian Wamble is an associate professor of political science at George Washington University, whose scholarship centers on how Black voters make decisions about which candidates to support. His book, We Choose You: How Black Voters Decide Which Candidates to Support, reveals the complex and thoughtful criteria Black voters use when evaluating political representatives. His work has earned major recognition, including the 2019 APSA Best Dissertation in Race and Ethnic Politics Award, the National Science Foundation's Doctoral Dissertation Research Improvement Grant, and the 2022 Distinguished Junior Scholar Award in Political Psychology. His research has been featured in leading academic outlets, and he has shared his expertise with broader audiences through platforms like The Monkey Cage, 538, and NPR's Code Switch. Julian has been a devoted Harry Potter fan since age 10 and proudly identifies as a Slytherin. His favorite book in the series is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and his favorite movie is Deathly Hallows Part 1. At GW, he teaches courses on race, political behavior, and identity, including his signature undergraduate course, Harry Potter and the Politics of Social Identity. In that class, he channels his natural inclination to analyze everything he loves and invites students to use the wizarding world as a lens to explore how identity shapes power, relationships, and society, not just in real life, but also in fiction. Wanting to share the joy and insight from that class, Julian began posting short clips on TikTok, initially just for friends who wish they could sit in without paying tuition to watch him passionately dissect Harry Potter. The videos unexpectedly went viral, and after months of requests for a larger platform, the podcast Critical Magic Theory was born. Like the course, the podcast dives deep into the wizarding world, but it also centers the voices of listeners through audience surveys. And in every episode, he unpacks beloved characters to better understand who they are, why they act the way they do, and how they navigate their worlds. The podcast is grounded in one core belief: loving something doesn't mean you can't be critical of it. Rather than accepting stories at face value, Critical Magic Theory embraces curiosity, nuance, and the magic that comes from asking deeper questions. And y'all, as a devoted listener, I'm just fully owning that I was just absolutely fangirling through the whole interview. Like, I couldn't even believe that he said yes to being on the episode. But also, it was so incredible to have this conversation with him. I was trying to figure out what episode had come out when I had gotten the inspiration to reach out. And it's an episode titled Shedding the Old Skins. And actually, it was an episode about Slytherin House, and I really don't remember what about it struck me, but for some reason, I was just really thinking about the fact that death is so central to the Harry Potter series, yet it doesn't feel like the characters really process their trauma. So that idea really stuck with me, and I got brave enough to reach out, and he said yes. So go team, and 2, I'm just really excited for y'all to hear this conversation. But I'm going to say right now, if you are not a Harry Potter reader or watcher, then you probably could just see me on the next episode, which in fact will be the final episode of season 1. So if you decide not to continue here, definitely come back for the final episode for 2025. Please introduce yourself and any relevant information about you.
Sure. I am Professor Julian Wamble. I am an associate professor of political science at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., where I teach a class called Harry Potter and the Politics of Social Identity, where we look at different identity-based topics like gender and class and structural power through the lens of Harry Potter in an attempt to kind of have deeper conversations about those topics in ways that are non-threatening. I also am the host of Critical Magic Theory, an analytical Harry Potter podcast. I never say the post colon, so I had to remember what it is, which is a podcast that does like deep dives into characters and tries to unpack what we can learn about the wizarding world, what we can learn about the characters, and what we can learn about ourselves by thinking about these characters in very interesting and fun ways.
Yes, I'm a longtime listener. I think a day one listener. I'm
Let's
pretty sure I'm a day
go.
one listener of
Yay.
Magic Theory.
Yeah, let's go. I love that.
I don't remember if it was TikTok or IG. You popped up somewhere, and then at some point the podcast became a
Yeah.
thing. Yes, I'm a fan. Those of you who don't listen, you should start listening to Critical Magic Theory. But what is Critical Magic Theory, and how did you decide to start it? Like, what led to it?
So I started posting snippets from my class on social media because I had a lot of people, a lot of millennials who were like, "Oh, I would love to take your class." And I was like, "Well, it would be cool to just share like a minute of my class with people." And when I first started doing it, I didn't think anything of it. I was like, "Whatever, like a couple hundred people maybe tops will enjoy it, maybe just my friends." And then it turned into a whole thing. And everyone was like, "Oh, I want to take this class." And I was like, "You don't want to pay GW's tuition." So everyone's like, "You need to do a podcast." And I'm a person who, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. Like I want to make sure that it sounds good, that it looks good. Like the whole, I'm a perfectionist in that way. And so it took me a long time, one, to get the courage to be able to do the podcast, two, to figure out what the podcast was going to be. I knew it couldn't be exactly what my class was because I'm not trying to get sued. I also knew
Right.
that I didn't want it to be a Harry Potter reread because there are a lot of podcasts, a lot of really great podcasts that already do that. And so I thought to myself, like, I want to do something different. I want it to be fun. I listen to a lot of Harry Potter podcasts. And so I was like, what are the things about those podcasts that I enjoy? And like the interactive aspects of it work. And then I thought, how can I simulate my class in some way? And so that's when I was like, oh, I wonder if I did like a survey and then just kind of analyze it on the podcast and then kind of did a mini lecture. So that's kind of how the structure was born. So it started as an offshoot of my social media work and then became its own thing in its entirety. And yeah, and it's a lot of fun. I have a really good time doing it. It's a lot more work than I think I originally understood, but it's very gratifying.
I love now that you've started, I'm sure this is awful for you, but you started breaking down responses by house too and analyzing that.
Oh
I
my
love
God.
that.
I know. And I feel so bad because I did it for the houses and then was like, yeah, but it felt unfair to
Yeah,
then start doing it for other characters,
when you
having
have
not done it for other ones. But I figure my thought process is like there will come a day in the not distant future, I guess, where like we're gonna reach the end of the characters. And
right.
my thought is like there are a lot of things that we talked about for later characters that we didn't talk about for other ones. There are a lot of ways that we group them. And so I figure we'll just kind of recalibrate. My thought is the next iteration of the podcast will be looking at book characterizations versus movie characterizations and
Yeah,
looking at like how we understand because I feel like more of us watch the movies more than we like reread the books.
right.
And so then there's a lot of bleeding, especially for me.
Yeah,
And so I think like thinking about characters where they completely change them in the movies would be a really interesting thing. And I think when doing it that way, I might go in and add houses back, and then maybe later on we could just revisit the same surveys, but just add that
yeah,
piece in. But like it was fun. It was
yeah.
a lot
I
more
could
work
tell
on
that.
my
That seemed
end.
like a lot of work.
Yeah, to like try and make it interesting, but also nerdy enough for like
Yeah.
the stats people. And I was like, yeah, this was very ambitious. It's fine to do for like 4 episodes, but I don't
Right.
know that I would want to do it for every single one. It was weird. It got to a place where I was like, okay, but people really loved it. And I get it. I totally get it. But there's also a skew. So
Yep.
like a lot of my listeners tend to be Slytherins and Ravenclaws.
Mhm.
So I don't have a lot of Gryffindors. And so I really had to do a lot of work to get up like Hufflepuffs. There's some Hufflepuffs, but like Hufflepuffs and Gryffindors,
Mhm.
because of the work that I do, with Harry Potter, like those, that's just not my audience. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so that also is kind of, it messes it up a little bit because the
Yeah.
skew kind of throws some things off. But at some way down the line, I'm thinking about doing it.
I'm a Gryffindor.
Hey,
I do peep the Gryffindor slander sometimes.
and you know what?
I'm actually now a Ravenclaw, but I used to be a Gryffindor.
I can't take it back. What's been said has been said. And unfortunately, like that's just the way that it is.
You know what I actually think it is? I don't think it's that your listeners are not Gryffindors. I think it's that the Gryffindors don't do the surveys.
That's also very fair. And that also tracks because I think I do get a lot of people who will jump on the post episode chat to defend like any sort of
Yeah.
Gryffindor slander. And we're about to move on to Dumbledore and I'm gunning for him. Like 10 toes down, full chest,
Oh,
like let's go.
Dumbledore's the worst.
Yeah, I
Man.
agree. An
Well,
absolute menace. And we
well,
will be talking about him for this episode.
yes.
So, because in
Got some
my,
things to
I have
say.
some things to say, but also like, anyways, we won't get into it, but we will be talking. We will be getting into it, but just not right now.
Okay, okay. So I do want to get a sense of where you stand with certain things. I think it matters as we're entering into this conversation. So which death in the books hit you the hardest and why?
Dumbledore's.
Me too. Tell me
It
why.
it wrecked me because I think like, and I remember when I first read it, and I tell this joke all the time, like I just didn't believe he was dead. I was like, he feels so untouchable, and even in the moment where we're witnessing the truth of his mortality by virtue of the withered hand, there's a way that you just don't believe that this is going to be the end of him, that
Right,
somehow that hand is going to get healed. And I think that I was so beyond terrified at the prospect of him not being there to guide us vis-a-vis Harry through the
right,
journey of bringing down Voldemort. It felt like abandonment. And also the way he died, it felt like in many ways like so mundane for somebody so
right,
great just to be like, oh, I just Avada Kedavra this person, no battle, no fight. It would have been one thing if his battle with Voldemort in the Ministry of Magic would have, like, if that would have yielded his death, it would have been like, oh, wow, like a real warrior's death. But to be standing there seemingly begging Snape
right.
to kill him
Hmm.
or not to kill him from the vantage point that we
Right.
have at that moment, it felt so, he felt so small, and it
Hmm.
just, it wrecked me. When I finished that book, I remember there used to be a website called dumbledoresnotdead.com, and I used to visit it every day reading theories about like, oh, he's actually an animagus, and like it wasn't actually Fox, it was him. And like I couldn't fathom the idea that he was no longer there person to like be the guide. And so it really, it gutted me more than any other death in the series. I think I will say, I in the beginning of Deathly Hallows, when I thought Hagrid was dead, I was like, listen, JK Rowling, not him, not Hagrid, but we made it. But yeah, that death, Dumbledore's death, really it got me.
I picked that one because that's the only one I have like a really visceral memory of my reaction to it. I used to work at this all-girl summer camp in between every summer after like college.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those books came out during the summer, and I would make that the weekend that I had off and would go and read the book and come back because the girls would ruin, like the campers would ruin it. Someone would
Yeah.
tell them in their family, and then they'd be like, "Oh, Dumbledore dies." So I
Right.
was like, I gotta go do the book. I didn't quite finish it while I was away, but I got up the morning before camp started and was finishing it, and that happened. And I went into my friend's cabin next door and got in her bed. I was just sobbing
Yeah.
because it was so awful and
Yeah.
like you said, unbelievable. But I was like, there's just no freaking way.
Like, how are we going to do this? You know what I mean? Like, at that point, we understood the stakes and they were so high. And all this stuff happened and all this stuff transpired. And then I read those books. I mean, I read that one came out, I think, in 2005, I think. And I remember, I don't even remember, I don't remember where I was, but I remember I read that chapter like 3 times because I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
I'm so sorry. I'm in denial. Like this, I misread that, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Something else happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny now with everything, the lens
Mm-hmm.
grown up, and I've listened to a lot of the like reread podcasts from a
Yeah.
critical lens, or even just like the Potterless one where he's a grown up
Oh
read.
yeah.
And a lot of that stuff is put it all in different perspectives with him, but I still get emotional at his death in the movie.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, and that's yeah, and the movie, it's that's the death for me in the movies too. I think like I think it's a little bit more dramatic. Like the drama of it makes it seem much grander in the movies than you feel in the books. Like the scene of him like falling down and like the camera's up and like it's
Y'all can't see it, but we were just miming him
yeah,
slowly.
we exactly. Yeah, yeah, we were doing it. We were doing the Dumbledore fall, but like the music, like I cried in the movie when I first saw it. I was a counselor at a camp and we like snuck away the night that movie came out to go to a midnight showing and I absolutely cried. And I think it was both the like very visceral like way of seeing it happen, but then also the kind of cinematography of it and everything. It just like it hit in a way that was kind of crazy for me. But I'm trying to think of other movie deaths that I feel like they really put their foot in that one more than most
Yeah.
other one.
I don't know why the one that gets me still is in the movies and
Yeah.
doesn't even really register in the books is Cedric's. And it's specific because his
Oh.
dad, when he's
Oh.
going, my boy, my
Oh my God.
son, I'm like,
Gutted.
oh,
Gutted.
every time.
Because let me tell you something. The actor who's playing his father is acting for his life.
Yeah.
He said, I may not be in this movie very much, but you know what? You're gonna get it right
Remember me.
now. And that, yeah, no, no, that is like,
Yeah.
and I mean, that's such a good one too, because Cedric's death is so wrong place, wrong time vibe. And
Right.
you feel so, in some ways, guilty because it's like, you shouldn't have been here.
Right.
And if you hadn't have been so noble, you wouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah. And just the whole kill despair of it all, right? Like
Oh,
that, what
yeah.
a horrific thing to say. And those are like
Bring
those
my body
last,
back to my dad.
I
Yeah.
can't, I can't.
I'm getting like
Yeah.
chills thinking about
Yeah,
it.
I know. Yeah, that scene is really in the movies is it and another one in the books that gets me every time actually is actually Lillian James's. Like when they're in Bathilda Bagshot's house and Voldemort shows up, but then like and then so we have this moment where he like remembers when he fell and like you hear James be like, Lily, take care and go upstairs. And then like you get the actual dialogue of this moment. And there's baby Harry in the back. That is it hits. It hits in a really like insane way because up until that moment we've not had a
Right.
really good sense of like what actually transpired in Godric's Hollow that night and to know like there were conversations like it was just a crazy yeah, it's very visceral.
What do you think the movies get wrong as it relates to a specific death or death in general? So just compared to how it was written,
Yeah.
we see it.
I think that the movies, I think they added the drama for Dumbledore's death, right? Like I mean in the movies, like I mean the book in the books he just goes up and then falls down and it's like everyone's just standing there like, "Oh." They just go for it, right? Like
Right.
everyone just starts doing stuff. And in some ways like that's the gut punch of how especially in the magical world, quick and finite death is.
Right.
Like Avada Kedavra happens. There's no way to block it. You know, there's no way to really evade it. It just happens. And then life keeps going, right? Like the Death Eaters then just run into the castle and they just wreak havoc. And Harry's, you know, is bound and then all of a sudden he's freed. And it happened that instantly. And I think the movies, and so I don't maybe characterizing it as wrong isn't quite right, but I think the movies add the emotional heft that I think death ultimately brings for the people who are like emotionally attached to the deceased, right? And so that slow motion, that like kind of very guttural feeling that one has, I think the movies capture that, but the books I think speak to the truth of death as well, which is that people die and life for the life around them, like the people who may not know that person or like it just keeps going. And I think the books capture that in a way that is very disorienting.
The thought that I was just having listening to you was with Sirius when he's dying, the
Hmm.
thing like the face he makes when he's like, "Oh, wait." Like that's something that reading you really
Yeah.
can't grasp it, but watching it I was like,
Sirius's death,
Yeah.
it's so weird because like I remember being so unaffected by it. Because I
Wow.
didn't understand what happened.
Okay.
Like I think I felt like Harry. Like I felt like, oh, he fell behind the veil. Cool. That's another moment in the books where I went back and reread it like a number of times to try to understand what transpired
Right.
because I couldn't quite grapple with the idea of like it felt so not real
Hmm.
when it happened. And I think like it was a very weird sensation of like, oh, he died. And I couldn't deal with it. And also, maybe that's just a me thing. Now that I think about it, I'm like, is this how I deal with death in real life? But there's a way that I really had to kind of like understand exactly what was going on. And the movies, though, yeah, that is a death that I'm like, oh, oh, okay,
Right.
it felt bigger. And then the fact that he had like the ghost of a smile on his face. And but for Sirius, I also think, and I've not thought about this before, but like if there was ever a way a person wanted to die, that's how he wanted to die.
Mm.
Like fighting a battle
Right.
with his friends, with James's doppelganger. I think if ever there was a way that he wanted to go out, it would be fighting because he's a consummate soldier. It's all he's ever known. And that's kind of the place where his brain is stagnated, is in the fight. And so I think if there was any consolation, I think that that would be it for me, is like, this is how you would have wanted to go.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Beautiful but depressing.
It is depressing. I just was talking to my students that we just finished Order of the Phoenix yesterday, and we were talking about Sirius, and I had a student who was very critical of him, and I think there's some reasons to be critical of him. But I was saying, like I spend a lot of time talking about just where his head is at in the midst of all of this, and so I think like with that in mind, there's a way that like this would have been how he would have wanted to go.
When it's all said and done,
Mhm.
what do you think the series teaches readers about death? And why do you say that?
I think one of the big lessons of these books actually is that death is not the end. Dumbledore tells Harry that when he talks about Nicholas Flamel. He tells Harry that a little later on. I can't remember when, but there's another conversation he has about it. We also get the quote on the like headstone of his parents about like death being just the beginning. And then I also so I think that there's a way in which death is portrayed to us as a thing not to be afraid of, but rather to be kind of accepted as like the next part of an adventure. And I think that Voldemort's entire arc
Yeah.
embodies this because like he is so afraid of death
Right.
and the lengths he's willing to go to avoid it and the belief that he has about like what death means. He's very resentful of the fact that his mother dies after giving birth to him, and I think that there's a way that his entire arc as a character is meant to kind of show us the extent to which being afraid of dying and trying to avoid death actually makes things worse, because he ultimately ends up dying significantly sooner than he would have if he hadn't have done any of the things that he did. And the lengths that he's willing to go, all of the murder, all of the kind of lying, and all of the just things that eat away at your soul, so much so that like the quality of life is
Right.
deteriorated. And so I think that there's a way that these books kind of teach us to accept the inevitability of death, but also not to see it as the end of something but the beginning of something else.
Yeah, and I think the Three Brothers tale shows that too, towards the
Absolutely.
end, right? Where it's like the one brother who accepts it and goes with him willingly is the one that leads the like most fulfilling life.
And doesn't try to cheat death in any capacity, right? Like the second brother tries to bring back his bay, and that
Does not work.
it doesn't work. And the first brother doesn't believe that death is possible because of how powerful he is. And it's like you can't bully death into avoiding you, right? But also what's interesting about the third brother that I think is again, I've not thought about this before, but like he doesn't just live his life. Like he's actively hiding, right? Like he
Yeah.
is. So it's like questions about how, I mean, he was able to live a life enough to be able to like have a child and pass it down and do all of that stuff, but there's a way in which like even his tale is also one of trying to avoid the inevitability of a thing, and he's also privileged in that he gets to decide, I want to do this, like
Yeah.
I'm ready. And I think that there's a beauty to that, but there's also like a fallacy to that particular thing for many people.
That is true. I guess I have always thought of it as like he's the one that's doing it right, but you are right. That's after he's like hiding.
Right, like you actually took the cloak so that you could hide from
Yeah.
death. And so, in truth, Hillary, you really have me out here like, like I'm like, oh, I've never thought about this before. In truth, it's not even that he's like the more humble person. He's just
Right.
the smartest. Like
Mm,
he's just the smartest one. Like he's just the one who figured out like,
yeah.
oh, instead of trying to like if you can't beat him, join him. Give me your cloak. Give me the thing that you use and I'll be fine. And
I've always been like, oh, he's the one but no,
yeah, me too. I'm
actually
telling
just
you,
like his brothers, really, but
really, but like there's an arrogance to the way that he does it. He's just smart enough to say like, "Hey, I'm not going to try to hide from you. I'm not going to try to cheat you." Which is what the second brother's going to do. I'm
right.
actually just going to use your tools against you. And like, I've never thought about that before, but I'm like, these three brothers,
Yep.
they're all the same,
They're all the same.
but like yeah, yeah. Ooh, okay. Well,
Oh, yeah. I really was like, oh yeah, the story teaches us about what we're supposed to learn about death, but I don't think it actually does.
I think that there's a way that it teaches us like I think one thing that we will give the third brother is that he was trying to avoid an early death.
Yeah.
Ultimately, though, he says, okay, we're here. This is happening. And now I'm going to accept this. But what a fascinating, but it is fascinating because I think we are meant to walk away from that story feeling like, oh, he is the right one. He's humble. And it's like, no, no, I don't think he is. But I also think that there's a way that living is, in many ways, trying to avoid death
Hmm.
not in the same way, like not in the Voldemort way, not
Right.
necessarily in the like I'm trying to like cheat you by bringing someone else back from the dead or I'm too powerful, but like in many ways, right? Like we all do things to avoid dying. Like something as simple as like putting on a seatbelt when you get in the car, right? Like there's a way in which like that behavior is like for our safety so we don't die. You know what I mean? Like there's a way that like that behavior is seemingly similar to an invisibility cloak of like I'm living my life and I'm trying to do whatever I can do to avoid meeting death earlier than I want.
Hmm.
Well, we're gonna have to think about that one a little bit more because
Yeah. That I like messed my own self up. So moving on.
yeah, we're just here.
I think the namesake of our series, Harry, he deals with death like a lot in the series.
Hmm.
I'm wondering, how does his grief shape him? And then, do you think he even really ever seems to process his grief? Or does the narrative just keep like quickly moving by? Or maybe there's like kind of both versions of it. How do you see it shaping him?
It's the unfortunate truth for Harry that he doesn't really have time to grieve. After Cedric dies, he's immediately plunged back into an abusive situation because he has to go back
Mhm.
to the Dursleys. He then is like being manipulated by Dumbledore. I said it. And so he doesn't really get to deal. And no one in his orbit is acknowledging the trauma of what's happened to Cedric. Like no one is engaging in any sort of behavior where they give him an outlet to be able to say like, "How are you feeling?" Immediately it's like, "Oh, the Dementor came. Oh, you are being, maligned by the government and the media." And so he's left to his own devices to try and figure out these things. He never gets the chance to kind of mourn the fact that his parents aren't alive. You know what I mean? Like the
Right.
moment that he finds out the truth of all these things, something else happens immediately after, and he has to go and like do something else.
Yeah, like he finds out how his parents die, and then now you're gonna go be a wizard.
Exactly,
So-
exactly. And it's like, oh no, your parents weren't killed. Like your parents weren't killed in a car crash. And he's like, wait, what? And they're like, but we don't have time for that because like we gotta go. We gotta go get you some school supplies. Like so, there's a way that I think like I don't think Harry navigates death particularly well at all. And I think even in the end, when he goes and he sacrifices himself, I think like he's resigned to it
Mhm.
in a way, but even then he doesn't have time to process it. because Voldemort's given him an ultimatum and a time limit.
Right.
And so he's like, you have an hour. And in that hour, you spent a considerable amount of it in the pensieve in Snape's memory. So now you come out and you're like, I got 15 minutes. And I was just told that I have to sacrifice myself.
Right.
There's none of the there's none of that. I mean, even in like the post-canonical lore, like in Cursed Child, like I've seen the play. I read it, don't read it, but I've seen the play. The play's
It's
amazing.
yeah, it plays magical. I do
But
want to see the one show version of it. I only seen the two show
yeah,
version.
I saw the one show version of it. It's just faster. But
Mhm.
anyways, even in that, like there's no acknowledgement of the fact that Harry actively died. It's almost as if he didn't. As
Right.
if that moment was just like a blip, which is interesting because it kind of stands in the face of like the way we understand death throughout the rest of the text, right? And so I think he's really bad at it. I think he doesn't understand it, and I think even the moment in Deathly Hallows when he goes and visits his parents' grave in Godric's Hollow, he doesn't understand what's written on his parents' gravestone, and I think he just has a very elementary understanding of death, despite having experienced it a lot. And like even when Dumbledore dies, like it's like, well, I don't have time no more, and I gotta go get these Horcruxes. And I think that there's just like life keeps lifing, and he doesn't have the privilege of grieving.
I feel like part of maybe the struggle too with it, just listening to the idea that he's not good at it too, is as I'm thinking about the adults around him,
Let's have that conversation.
yeah, I don't think anyone's good at it. So there's like
No.
no model for
Yeah,
him
yeah.
for how
And
to process it.
and one of the things that I think we forget about a lot because we spend such a considerable amount of time in the magical world is that Harry's like emotional foundation was laid by Vernon and Petunia Dursley. Right. Like
Literally, neither of them are mourning his parents' death at all.
no. And we don't know them to be particularly empathetic, sympathetic people to begin with on any capacity. You know, one of the things that's added in, it was an added scene in the movies, but that was ultimately deleted, is a bonus scene in Deathly Hallows Part 1, the movie. And in that scene, Petunia says to Harry, "You didn't just lose a mother in Godric's Hollow. I lost a sister." And that's the only real moment that we get a sense of her loss.
Right.
And there's a lot to say about how people who are bigoted understand grieving and loss, but Harry does not have any examples. And part of that, and I think what we spend a lot of time talking about on critical magic theory and is like this is a war.
Right.
In that grief is a luxury that
Hmm.
Harry is not privy to.
Yeah.
And none of the people are. None. I mean, again, Mrs. Weasley is another example of someone who lost her brothers and has not dealt with that.
I'm just thinking about even like Dumbledore and his sister
Yeah.
and just all the ways that shapes him and changes who he is. But having all the information to help someone be safe, he doesn't then translate that into any
Yeah. Yeah.
people
No, he
action.
does.
Like he doesn't do anything with that learning. And then I don't even know why I even care about this, but thinking about even like Barty, it's not Barty Crouch. Yeah, Barty Crouch and all the nonsense that happens there because they're not like processing death.
Yeah, no, no, no. I mean, and just like there's always this way of like someone dies, but everything has to keep going, right? Like his mom is dying. We put her in Azkaban. Bye. Like there's just like there's no
Crazy.
his
Crazy work.
he kills his father and everyone's like, well, he's a bone in the backyard now, keep it going. Like, and I was thinking about this as I was preparing for our meeting, and I thought there's one funeral in the entirety of this series, despite
Right.
all the bodies,
Mad deaths.
like so many bodies, and we
Yeah.
get one solitary funeral, and it's
Hmm.
for Dumbledore. And even then, like I feel like many of us were like, well, he's not really dead. Like for me, I was like, this is a sham funeral. I was like, and so like I didn't get to grieve either for him. And then I think what else is true about the magical world is that like because we spend so much time with ghosts,
Yep.
There's a way in which like we don't actually really buy into the binding and like finite nature of death because there's a chance that they'll come back or portraits or whatever, right? There's always something that holds on to the essence of the people that we lose. And so in that way, you never truly lose them despite the fact that they're kind of locked into this one moment.
Right.
And I wonder if that also contributes to the lack of processing of grief and true understanding of the like the finality of death.
Yeah, because the persons can also kind of be like always there. So what you just said made me think of the fact too. Actually, I can't remember what it was you just said, but something you said made me think of the fact that like Harry lives in the magical world now.
Hmm.
It isn't till book seven that he goes to his parents' headstones. So first of all, we only see two cemeteries at all. We have like the where Voldemort's dad is buried,
Yes, yes.
and the only other cemetery that I can think of is Harry's
It's Godric's Hollow.
parents.
Yeah.
And that's the first. How is that when you learn how your parents have died, that is the first time you've never thought of like, hey, Dumbledore, could I go see my parents
More than that, no adult in your orbit thought, hey, maybe it would be good for you to go and visit your parents. That's such a good
and
point. I
see
never
a
thought about
statue
that.
about
Yeah,
them?
yeah.
Because so like
And
in
maybe,
my research is like place-based education, what can you learn from a cemetery? What can you learn from memorials, right?
yeah,
And then now that's got me thinking like, wait, how did nobody
no one.
and he didn't ask like he even if it wasn't just the headstones, like there's a literal memorial to your parents and
Yeah.
he's not seen any of that and no one thought to take him there.
And oh my God, like the thing, I just feel like, well, all these adults are so derelict in duty. It's just ridiculous because
It's
I'm
giving
like,
abuse, child abuse all around.
well, because you can't, in some ways, I don't expect Harry to like have the emotional wherewithal to even know that this is an option for him.
Yeah,
Like, he doesn't know anything about Godric's Hollow. Like, he felt like it was a novelty for him to even be able to go in the first place. And it feels to me like, I'm like, well, no, you just like didn't even think about it. And what's more, and also kind of what's sad is that going to Godric's Hollow had nothing to do with his parents and everything to do with trying to get his hands on the sword of Gryffindor. So there's no like, oh, I'm going to be talking about this for a while. He got something, like I won't call it closure, but he got something, but it wasn't even what he wasn't looking for it.
even with what you were saying earlier, how every time he's like processing something, something happens.
Yeah,
It's
right.
the same
Even
thing.
in that moment, right? Then
Finally gets to go see it.
right.
Even their house is a literal memorial. So there's like these three ways he can like better understand.
Yep.
And no one before that moment was like, oh, maybe Harry should go see this at some
Right.
point. And then when he does finally get to go see it, immediate
Nagini
man.
Bagshot shows up. This was one of the more interesting things in the books versus the movies, right? Is that like in the books, he's polyjuiced, so he's not even himself.
Right.
And in the movies, he says, like, I don't want to come here being someone else. And in fact, they add a much higher level of sentimentality to him going back to Godric's Hollow in the movies than exists in the books.
Because he's him.
Right. He's
Yeah.
him, and also he's like, I don't want to be anyone else.
Hmm.
And that they were like, no, we're gonna do that. I'm like looking at the book right now. I'm like, should I pull it out and see what's going on? But
What's interesting is this is an example of a bleed for me because I forgot in the books that he
mm-hmm. Yeah, that they are both. I think they're
probably
both like old. They're older people. Like they're
Mhm.
an older couple, and they go. And I can't even remember. Hold on, I gotta look at the book because I can't remember what. And no, I don't normally just keep my books on my desk, but because like there are moments when I'm recording where I'm
Mhm.
like, I need the receipts. But there is a way that I think that they go. I'm trying to think. Is it the apparated to the village of Gigi? A balding middle-aged man and his rather mousy wife. He's wearing the Horcrux, which like, hello? Um, and then he says basically like, let's take off the cloak because they were underneath it. And then they said it's Christmas Eve. And then Hermione says they'll be in there, won't they? Your mom and dad. I can see the graveyard behind it because I see the church. And so it's actually Hermione. And then he says, now that he was so near, he wondered whether he wanted to see it at all.
Mm.
Perhaps Hermione knew how he was feeling because she reached for his hand and took the lead for the first time, pulling him forward. And then she's the one who notices it. She says, Harry, look. And she was pointing at the war memorial, and as they passed it, it transformed into an obelisk. Like, why wouldn't you want him to know that this exists?
So even with that, he was really just going to he just wanted to go to the house.
Yeah,
And it's really Hermione who's like, well,
right.
wow.
While we're here.
So even Hermione has like more sense than the adults around him.
And I can understand in some ways why Dumbledore wouldn't want to go back because that's where his like mom and sister died, but no one else.
Lupin, the
The
Weasleys.
Weasleys, like you spent all that time there and you didn't. But I again, like none of these people have dealt with their trauma because Lupin
Yeah.
wouldn't go. Lupin
Right.
would be like a wreck, you know? I mean, yeah, it's interesting, right? But like, I don't know. I feel like the denial of that for him is really something. Like what it would have been like for him to have gone back. And that's also something that we even in like fan fiction, like you don't see a lot of instances even in rewrites of narratives of him going back to
Mm.
Godric's Hollow.
I think that kind of comes to my next question. When I was a freshman in high school, the second one had just come out, so I went back and read the first. So I was like a little older, but still formative years. And then you're reading these for however many years, and I just wonder like what is it doing to a young person to be reading this series where all these people are just dying all over the place all the time and no one's ever dealing with it. So I feel like even in that comment about fan fiction, it continues to be perpetuated in fanfic because the books themselves don't even deal with it. So are we learning
Yeah.
to deal with it?
No, I don't, I didn't think about how traumatized these adults were until I was an adult. And I
Hmm.
didn't think about the issues of like how Harry was dealing with all of it. I didn't see anything wrong with it. I didn't see anything that like needed to be repaired or like corrected. I was just like, well, because again, right, like we are so busy as readers of like, oh, well, like, oh, that sucks. I can't believe that, you know? But I also do think that like listening to people talk about their reaction when Sirius died. When I think about my own reaction with like Dumbledore, I really did go through the stages of grief. Like in retrospect now, I'm like, oh, denial. Big time. I was apoplectic at Snape. I couldn't believe it. I was so mad. And I was even more upset in that book because then it's revealed that he's the Half-Blood Prince. And I'm like, so you mean to tell me you killed our guy and you've been running around here helping us at the same time? Like what how do I reconcile that? And I think that there is a way that like we as readers get the opportunity that Harry never gets, which is to like put the book down and really process what it all felt like. And I think the other thing is, particularly for like Sirius's death and for Dumbledore's death, is that like we had to sit with those realities because
Right.
the next book wasn't out.
My friend Molly was always a Snape apologist, always, the whole series. And so even when Dumbledore died and it was Snape that did it, she just always like it was like she always was like something else. Something else happened. Not so much that Dumbledore was alive, but like she just kept being like there
Something else.
for it. And so as mad as I was at Snape, I also always had that in the back of my mind that like there's gonna be some kind of explanation. I was grieving, but I was never necessarily like super mad at Snape about it because I kept waiting. Only because I had the little voice of Molly in my head.
Yeah, I remember when they were getting ready for the seventh book to come out, and you would like walk past Borders, and as they were getting ready for all the things TBT, RIP, Borders, and they would be like, "Is Snape a villain?" Or it like what I can't remember. It was like a villain or something else, and I just remember being like, "That guy, I've never liked him," and I'm still like that. These Snape
Wait,
episodes, unfortunately, are me being that trying to not be that for the sake of not isolating my listeners, but it is one of those things I think that we as readers get the opportunity to process the deaths in these books better than the characters do because we get to take a break and like put the book down and process. In terms of what the books teach us about death, I think it all depends on which aspects of death you focus on in the books, right? Because I think we get a full gamut,
Right.
especially in the last book, right? Like everybody dies. But then again, I'm kind of repeating myself.
Everybody dies.
Everybody dies, but then at the same time, we all get the closure with them, right? Like we get Lupin coming back, we get Sirius coming back, James Lily comes back, right? Like we get those people. We even get Dumbledore at the very end when Harry is in the, limbo and they have a full-on conversation. And then Dumbledore is there with his portrait, kind of there cheering for Harry in the end, right? Like there's a way in which these books present death as an impermanence,
Right.
which, like, if I wanted to give J.K. Rowling a lot of credit, I could say, like, that's a really good lesson to teach, right? Because the reality is that people, even after they've left, are still very much with us in a number of ways, whether it be pictures, whether it
I
be,
just wrote that down. I
yeah,
said it's like teaching us that they're always with
yeah.
us.
And I think that there's a way that like there is a truth to that. I think that, and especially like with the resurrection stone, right? When Harry says, will you go with me? And his mom is like, always, like we'll be there with you. And we it's just us with you. Like no one can see us but you. And I think that there's a way that that is really gorgeous. And what a beautiful reinvention of the original tale, right? Where the original brother was trying to like
Like
show
getting
death up. And this is a moment of, in some ways, petitioning death for a second to say, like, hey, just give me this. Just give me this moment.
when I'm watching that movie, pretty much from the start of him in the pensieve on, a full wreck. And all of that with his parents walking. It, yeah. Are you familiar with that TikToker who she's a young black girl who is reading the series?
Oh, Kiara Lewis.
Yes,
Yeah,
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 Dear Lewis, and just the her reactions to everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
I think I just thought of her because you were saying how we as readers do get to process,
yeah,
whereas they in that world just keep moving on after
yeah.
everything. And I think she's like the perfect embodiment of that, where she's
Oh,
throwing,
yeah.
just putting it down and walking away. Whereas Harry just,
He has to keep going.
yeah,
And again, I think that especially when we first really meet and experience death in a meaningful way, right, with Cedric in Goblet of Fire, that is the beginning of the Second Wizarding War. And from that moment on, there is no rest for the wicked. There's no rest for the weary. Everything just keeps going. And as much as we are still kind of in the cycle of going back to the Dursleys and then going to the Weasleys and then going to the school and then like as much as that's still part of it for, years 5 and 6, there's still death all around. And I remember when a friend died and I was kind of like in a state of trying to navigate it. And I just remember thinking like, and the world keeps turning. Like there are still things that I have to keep doing. And I feel like war really necessitates like the you have to keep going. And in all the war movies and all of the battle things we see, right? Like somebody dies and everyone's like, go, 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 go. Like I think of I'm a big Lord of the Rings movie fan. I couldn't do the books, but I love the movies. And even when Gandalf is fighting the Balrog and he's about to fall, he looks at the rest of the fellowship and he goes, fly, you fools. Like he's like, you all need to keep going. And then they get out of Moria and it's actually Boromir who's like kind of a disaster, who's like, hey, let's give them a moment. And Aragorn is like, we don't have time for that. Like, if we stay here, orcs are gonna be like, we have to keep going. And there's a way that like I think that there's a lot of things in society that invite us to just keep going. And I think that there's a way that there is virtue to that, but also kind of like problematic thinking in terms of that idea as well. And I feel like Harry Potter teaches us both sides of that coin.
I feel like we need a fanfic that gives us like the Wakanda Forever version
Yeah.
where we get to like the actions happening, but then there's also just this deep
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. And I also think that like some of it is absolutely gendered in these books, right? Like I think that because Harry was socialized by the Dursleys, but like the only man he really knows growing up with was Vernon, like all of his emotion comes out as anger. And he really doesn't have another outlet to be able to figure out how to navigate that. We see Ron crying when Fred dies, which is another devastating death. But even then, like there's a way that Harry just experiences it and then keeps going. And I just listened to
Like
that
walking
chapter.
in the haze
Yeah,
and not reacting to anything.
yeah, yeah. And so I think the other thing that is true about these books and what they teach us about death is like Harry teaches us what it is when you just like have to keep going. Voldemort teaches us what it is when you don't actually deal with it. When you try to fight it. And Dumbledore teaches us what it is when you don't deal with it. And I've always seen people talk about like how each of them are the three brothers. And saying that out loud just now, I'm like, oh, Voldemort.
Whoa!
Voldemort is the older brother. Dumbledore is the second, and Harry is the third. Here we are, y'all.
My mind.
This is where we're at.
That's so true.
Yeah, I think that that's
It's like an allegory that's just showing us or maybe teaching us about the books we've been reading all along without realizing,
yeah. See, but sometimes I wonder like the extent to which she knew what she was doing.
or how
Like,
much we put on her.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I'm like, it's possible that you meant to do that, but I also think that there are other bigger plot holes and things that exist in this
Yeah.
in the text that suggest that like you weren't thinking this hard.
One of the first things Harry learns in potions saves his friend
Right.
in book six. So there's like stuff like that too,
Right,
where
right,
you're
right.
like,
Where it's very
oh,
clear, like you knew, but I'm like I mean, I would give credit where credit is due if that had been her thought process. I'm just not convinced because I talk about some things sometimes and I'm like, girl, I know you didn't think this hard.
Yeah.
And also, there are other things that exist in the world where I'm like, you give us this, but you don't leverage your critique against it. It just exists in the
Yeah.
space. So I'm like, to the extent that I think that you actually thought this all the way out, I'm not convinced.
I think even this idea of if they're the three brothers and then we learn about the three brothers story and then these guys are three brothers, there's still just the question of why is it like three dudes?
Well, and then there's that.
The person that keeps Harry alive is a woman, right? Like without Hermione, Harry dies every book.
I mean, yeah, the gender piece of it is just all so gross. The
Yeah.
internet says that Voldemort is the first brother, but Snape is the second brother. He symbolizes the second brother's grief and desire to bring back a lost love, represented by his deep, unyielding love for Lily Potter. And that's where you lost me. Well, I wouldn't characterize what Snape felt for Lily as love, and so
That's obsession. I think that logic still works with Dumbledore and his sister.
I agree. I think it works for Dumbledore and his sister. I think it works for Dumbledore and his mom and his dad. Like, I think he wants nothing more than to have his family back. And I think that in many ways, he would have wanted that more than anything. And I think that that's also why he put the ring on.
Yeah.
He had the Elder
Wow.
Wand, and I don't think he would have. I mean, I think he got it because he cared enough about it to have it. But I think, if nothing else, he wanted the Resurrection Stone more than anything else.
Dang.
So I like
Yeah,
it for Dumbledore more than I like it for Snape, I think.
I agree. That so there's an episode for you with
I
your
know, I know, I know. A bonus episode situation. Um, I might just play this section. I'll just be like, y'all go listen to this.
listen to us create new theories.
Yeah, I'd never thought about that before, but I think that there's a way that those three really do embody not only the three brothers, but just three different lessons about how to navigate death. Yeah, because Harry absolutely accepts death, not as an old friend, but accepts the inevitability of it.
It even is like what we were saying before, where we're realizing that brother really wasn't accepting death because he hid from it for so long. So it still does match that too, that none of them are
Hmm.
really dealing with it in a healthy way,
Right.
but they all have their ways that they're coming to death.
Yep.
And he put the ring on so that it wasn't like a ghost of person past that like drove him crazy. The ring literally did it.
Right.
Like literally, the ring was the death.
Yeah. Wow, wow, wow. Who knew?
Yes, I
Resting
I like it.
Resting places, learning spaces, y'all. Get into it. We're out here.
Yes. So my big focus with the podcast is always like what teachers can learn basically
Yeah.
from whatever it is we're talking about. I'm normally talking about like a cemetery or some kind of memorial space, but even thinking about something like fantasy literature and
Mhm.
Harry Potter specifically, how do you think they can use tools like this to teach themes related to death in the classroom or even teaching students about mourning and memory?
One thing that we've not talked about, at least explicitly, is the pensieve. And I think that one of the like most beautiful things about the pensieve is, and we've talked a little bit about like the different ways that magical people preserve memory. And we know that there are ghosts who themselves have decided death isn't for them, and so they just don't go. We have our paintings that also have people locked in to a certain moment in their life. And then we have the pensieve, which is like our own memories that are used as a way to kind of just recollect. And I think that there's a way that so many of us see, I mean, in many ways, there is obviously like a finality to death. But I think what the Harry Potter series does in a very beautiful way is invites us to realize how many things we have available to ourselves that not only help us grieve, but also help us remember. We don't see them necessarily used well in the books, but pictures and memories, those things exist for us. And I think that there's a way that teachers and like even, it's not in the movies, but in Deathly Hallows, right? Like Snape goes and he gets the picture and the piece of the letter that Lily signed her name on. And he keeps it like as a memento. And there's a way I think that like the books really do invite us to consider all the things that we have that serve as resurrection stones. And I think if I were teaching younger people and culturally, right, like we see, I think about like Dia de los Muertos, right, like bringing things and putting them on the ofrenda and like pictures and things of that nature, right, like that there's a way that like we all have these things and these totems that exist that allow for people who have left us to still be with us.
Right.
And I think the books do, with a little bit of like massaging on the part of a teacher, offer us a really interesting and meaningful way of thinking about what it is that we have of those people, both, tangibly, but also kind of emotionally and mentally, and what we can then do to kind of keep them alive in our hearts and in our minds.
Even Harry's Patronus.
Yeah, exactly. And
Even that
Snape's.
whole scene actually is like he really thinks his dad is coming.
Yep,
And then in the end it turns out that
it's
that
him.
internal like spirit of my father is what's going to but
Yeah,
it's me, it's him the whole time.
yeah,
And then the shape of his Patronus.
yeah,
Like there's just this very powerful way that his dad is literally just always with him.
yeah, yeah. And like, you know, the beauty of having, the pictures and all of that. Like there's a way in which I think there's a way that like all of that just feels so meaningful and impactful for Harry. And so much of his journey is like real, like, oh, and I was gonna have something. I'm sorry, my brain did a thing, but also the invisibility cloak.
Mm,
Like the very thing that the tale tells us is, this way to kind of get around death is also very much a totem of Potter's past.
right.
And so then it's like also, what are the things besides trauma that we're passing down or that are passed down to us, right? And
Mm,
there's a way that like the cloak is passed down from generation to generation to generation and is no longer used to evade death, if that was ever really its true purpose, but still holds a very meaningful kind of lesson for us about keepsakes and things that we inherit. I mean, Harry inherits houses. He inherits an elf too, but that's we don't need to get into slavery, but yeah, I think that they're like I think it teaches us a lot about like how to still live with death.
it's interesting thinking about the cloak because earlier when we were talking about him saying, okay, I'll go with you as a friend, the thought I had and forgot back then was I think you had said it's kind of arrogant of him to like be like, give me your thing and I'm gonna use it against you.
Yeah.
And then he passes it down to his child. So
Hmm.
it's actually they're like passing down that arrogance till we get to Harry,
Yeah.
full-bodied, arrogant child. But I like that idea of it being not just trauma that's being passed down.
Yeah. But
Also,
also resilience. You
yeah,
know what I
really,
mean? Like there's a way in which that cloak, I mean, when Harry gets it in the first book, the instructions are use it well. And yeah, he uses it to break rules, but it also is a thing that actively keeps him safe from death.
yeah,
Spells bounce off of it. It cannot be summoned. It has hidden him from all kinds of situations all the time. It's kind of like his dad being there with him. I know, I'm about to get emotional.
yeah.
Um,
Make me cry.
there's a way that I think that he is able to, he has that like tangible connection to James in a very meaningful way. And I think the cloak is a very another memento that he has of all these things that like keep the people who he doesn't have with him regardless.
Man.
Listen, y'all. Are you listening? I don't think you're listening. Resting places, learning
Man.
spaces. We are here.
Oh, interesting. Just yeah. No, and I even with critical magic theory, there's stuff all the time that I'm like, what? Yeah. Yeah. And I wish I could remember what it was, what episode that I was listening to of yours that had me really thinking about this question of death in the series and how it's handled and is it handled well and what are we learning from it.
I'm trying to
But
think. And
this has
like
been amazing.
Molly for sure. Definitely like Lupin, maybe. I mean, there are a couple episodes where I'm like, but I remember particularly talking about Molly and being like, she's dealing with a lot and no one's talking about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, but this has been, you've opened my eyes to many a thing.
Same. I feel like there's an academic paper in this.
Say the word.
Thank you so
Oh
much.
my God. Thank you. This was a
This,
blast.
this has been awesome. Obviously, fangirling, and then even just getting to listen to you talk about like the world in which I'm researching in.
Yeah.
It's super great. So just thank you so much for your
No,
time.
thank you so much for reaching out. This was so much fun. And I'm not joking when I said like there are things that I'm like I've never thought about this before, but I'm like, okay, I got to sit with this a little bit. So I'm really excited. And I'm not going to hold you. You and I, we really hit it out of the park. So I feel like the girls are going to be gagged and they need to hear what we have to say.
Well, hello, co-host.
Hello.
Are you a co-host? What, we need the right word. It's
I'm not really a
co-host.
co-host. I'm just
You're
like
like
the
a
expert on this
knowledgeable
side.
Yeah, a knowledgeable expert. Gotta
I like
figure out
that. That
something.
sounds good.
Contributor.
Contributor.
Welcome, contributor.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so today we are really just being kind of nerdy. I mean, more nerdy than normal, I should say, and really thinking about all these conversations through Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
I actually was mostly thinking about it in the English class, so I'm going to say a little bit about what I was thinking, and then I'm actually going to pass it over to you for thinking about what it looks like in social studies.
Yeah, I have some thoughts.
Okay. So with English class, I think the series is a great way to teach symbolism, especially when you think about something like the Thestrals, book 5, I think. Just the metaphor that you could have there of the fact that some people see it differently after death. The Deathly Hallows as symbolism for different methods of coping with mortality, like denial, avoidance, acceptance. Of course, now, after that conversation, I don't really see the third brother as acceptance, so I got to figure out what that other coping mechanism is.
No, your literature brain was going crazy all over the place.
And then ghosts and portraits as a way of remembering, so really similar to like memorials and headstones. So I thought it would be really great just thinking about how to teach symbolism or teaching about symbolism. But then I also saw just a lot of writing activity potential, thinking about how the different characters grieve differently. So just having some sort of compare and contrast conversations, especially book 5, looking at the differences between like Harry and Cho as they're still dealing with the consequences of Cedric's death. Or even thinking about the idea of pairing it with other books. I had written down Bridge of Terabithia, but like grade level wise, that probably doesn't make sense.
It's middle school level.
Is it? Okay. And then if not that, then The Book Thief, something like The Book Thief is a little higher level. But those were the thoughts that I was having. I mean, I had so many, but I was trying to boil it down. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, yes. This conversation happening in an ELA class is just, that all of that literary analysis and listening to you have such a deep conversation, literary analysis, and connecting it to your culture and how you view the world. It was really fun to listen to.
Yeah.
But it did make me think in all kinds of different directions for social studies. So to start with where you were just ending there, cultural beliefs around death and grieving. So we know that this book sits in a specific context in Western civilization, and that is something that we do in social studies whenever we're approaching historical text or any kind of text really, is to put it in its contextual space to understand what influences were happening on the author, on the content of the text, just to have a better understanding of where it came from. And in social studies, we also very often are looking to the artistic world to understand the culture of whatever we happen to be studying about, or how art plays that function in the society. So the role of literature and art around these topics of death and grieving are definitely conversations that we have in social studies classrooms, and then comparing it to other cultures and how they believe people work through the process of understanding death and grieving, and how in different cultures we can grieve in different ways. And sometimes it is meant to be very public, and in other times it's meant to be very private. And understanding how different people approach that process can help us as individuals when we experience it ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we are talking about these kinds of things and using whatever resources will spark kids' conversations around it, so that we're really equipping them for how to handle the things that they will come across in life.
Yeah, I really like that. One of the things that I had written down as just something to be cautious of as a teacher is remembering the fact that there's other ways to mourn than that what's being showcased here in the Western world. And so I really like that idea of just building that whole conversation right into what you're doing, where they're actually looking at other cultures as well.
Well, and understanding that in the United States, we do have children from all different cultures. And so within our classrooms, there are vastly different ways that they are experiencing life and death. So important conversations that they're having. Another thing that this really early on in your conversation that I was thinking about in a social studies classroom, you were having off and on throughout the conversation, the discussion of how the books are different from the movie. And that is always, anytime you love a book and then there is a movie, there is always that fear.
Yeah.
Like, what are they going to do to my book? But then sometimes you find out, as you in several different places were saying, I think the movie did a better job than the book did in this instance. And why those choices were made, I think, are really important, because they are probably thinking about a specific audience and how they want to not like make the book better or make the story better, but just more relatable maybe to their audiences. And so those choices are interesting. But in a social studies classroom, we oftentimes are teaching students about things that were so long ago that it's very abstract, and they have a hard time understanding what that looked like, sounded like, were experienced by people in the past. And so we try to use documentaries and historical fictions if we can, just so students can see what something looked like, right? Like being able to envision the British ships coming into Boston Harbor just before the American Revolution, and the fear that would have instilled, or that they were trying to instill in the people living in Boston. And so we try to use these dramatized or recreated events to give students that picture. But then we have to think, is that real? Was that, or how true to what actually happened was that? And there are all kinds of debates between historians when they watch movies like The Gladiator, and some, historians will, turn their shoulder like, oh, it's just, that's not what it was like. But then you'll have other historians that will say, except the whole point of those games was for it to be so fantastical that it, kept your population settled and happy. And so if we're showing it in this wildly dramatized fashion, perhaps that is appropriate.
Yeah. Well, even in same like with Hamilton, where a lot of that's not accurate. But it's interesting. It's fun. It got people interested in Hamilton.
For sure.
You're Googling which parts of this story is actually true. So now you're actually learning about someone.
You're curious.
That you really didn't learn about in school.
Before you weren't curious. Yeah, absolutely. And so there has been a shift in the study of history among some historians to write more in the narrative style, because that will bring people in. And yes, we always have to, and that's why we teach students how to have those conversations about the context and the author and the sourcing and all of that. But we are drawn to stories.
Right.
And the whole purpose of learning history is to understand humans. And we do that best through story.
Right.
So I really appreciated that conversation. You were talking about the difference between the book and the movies. And I was thinking, well, in the classroom, we have those same conversations of, we have these dry facts, and if we only write history in that way, people will stop learning about it.
Right.
Or we can approach it in a way that's much more engaging and will bring students in and help them develop their own narrative.
I love it. I'm snapping. Snaps.
It was fun. It was fun. So I also really enjoyed the conversation you were having around the impermanence of death in the magical world. And it made, as you were talking about how in that magical world, people stay alive in the images, they stay alive in all of these different ways, but remembering in that same book, if that book were to come alive in the Muggle world, that's not happening.
Right. Not at all.
And we are supposed to know that we are inhabiting the Muggle world as the readers of this book, but knowing that there is this other realm out there where death has this impermanence. But it made me think about there are other cultures that don't see death as so final, that, once someone has died, that is the last contact we have with them. And it reminded me of one of our earlier podcasts on the Thai spirit houses and how that is similar. It's not that specific individual that you're staying connected with, but that idea of the people that came before us are still around. So that is a cultural thing, not just a reality thing.
Right. I think a lot of the episodes really touch on that.
Yeah.
I think just think about Ghana in the cave, like what we were doing was communing with ancestors, and even Stonehenge. As silly as we felt with that episode, it still is this place that draws so many people there. So there's something, well, I ain't feel it, but something at Stonehenge draws people. And so, I think within the Muggle world, we really, have all these ways that death isn't as permanent as maybe it feels. Yeah.
It was definitely fun listening to the conversation you all were having. And
I was like losing it because I couldn't believe he said yes. And then every time he was like, whoa, I had never thought of that before. I was like, oh my gosh, did I do that? I was like,
totally.
Oh my God. It was just so fun. Well, thank you again for being here. Wait, what did we say you are now? You were the contributor. The educational contributor. Or
absolutely.
Should you be the correspondent?
No, I like contributor.
All right. So,
but I'm going to start putting that in my email signature.
Thank you to my educational contributor, Michelle Anderson. I don't think we said your name.
Oh, I'm Michelle Anderson.
I do put your name in the show notes, so if they care, they'll find it there. All right, but yes, as always, thank you so much, Michelle. Well, that wraps up this episode of Resting Places, Learning Spaces. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share it with fellow educators, travelers, or anyone interested in the intersection of history and place. You can also follow me on Instagram at Professor Van Dyke to continue the conversation or recommend a topic. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember, every resting place has a story to tell.